Today in Entre Nous, we're going to focus on French painter Henri Matisse. Matisse was one of the undisputed masters of 20th century art, particularly known for his incredible use of color. And while you might know Matisse and his work, you might be less familiar with his daughter, Marguerite. Well, a new exhibition on now at Paris's Modern Art Museum is trying to change just that. It's called Matisse and Marguerite Through Her Father's Eyes. And I'm joined now on the set by the co-curator of the show, Barat-Mabille. Charlotte, thank you so much for coming on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
So first of all, just to start, for those viewers who perhaps aren't quite so familiar even with Henri Matisse, the father, why was he such a leading figure in modern art?
Well, in France, at the beginning of the 20th century, he was the leader of that movement that was called Fauvism, the wild beast, which made a scandal, really, in Paris for their use of really bright colors. People had never seen things like this before, and it provoked a real scandal, and Matisse was the leader of that movement. And then he had a long career and kept reinventing himself until the paper cutouts, which is also a very well-known phase of his work.
Indeed, and he painted many subjects throughout his lifetime, but one that came back again and again was his daughter, Marguerite, who's the focus of this new exhibition that you co-curated. So tell us a bit more about Marguerite Duthuit Matisse. Who was she?
So she was Matisse's eldest daughter. She was born in 1894 when Matisse was just 24 years old, so a pretty young man, from a relationship that Matisse had with a model, Caroline. So Marguerite was born when the couple was not married, and she was recognized by Matisse only 2 years later. And then very early on, she would become one of Matisse's most faithful model. She's the one that really stay in his art through the longest period of time. And we see her growing up, going from a child to a teenage girl to a young woman, and until the last portraits are made when she was 50.
So Matisse actually had 3 children in all. Why did he focus so much on Marguerite as a model?
This is a difficult question. He had 2 sons after Marguerite, Jean and Pierre, and he was a very close family, and Matisse was a very present father for all of his 3 children, but it's true that in his art, it's Marguerite that really has this very prominent presence. Matisse mostly painted women, so that's one possible answer. And maybe another one is that Marguerite was very sick when she was little. She had a tracheotomy when she was very little, and it was a real trauma for the whole family. I think Matisse was almost afraid that he would lose her, and maybe that explained also this attachment he had for her. And then if you look at pictures of her, she had this very intense gaze and this very interesting face that for sure he never stopped exploring and depicting in all different facets.
It's interesting because in a lot of these paintings we're seeing as you're speaking, we always see Marguerite with this intense gaze, but also this black choker around her neck. Apparently that was to cover the tracheotomy scar following diphtheria.
Exactly. So she had this very serious medical issue when she was just a little girl, and then she had this high colors of black ribbon to hide the scar, to protect it also as well. But then as she grew older, she would add a little jewel, a pendant. So she made that medical device kind of became also like a fashion accessory when she grew older. And it was only when she was 25, after the medical improvements that were made during the First World War, with the gueule cassée, that she was finally operated and liberated from the black ribbon, which disappears.
And one of the rare works that's on view in the show is called Marguerite with a Black Cat. I believe we have this one we can bring up. It was completed in 1910, and apparently this was one that Henri Matisse never wanted to sell. Here it is. Tell us about that.
Yes. It's a painting that Matisse considered very important, and 2 reasons. First, he kept it until the end of his life, and then he went to Marguerite and then to Marguerite's son. It was obviously a painting that was very close to his heart, but also a painting he deemed very worthy of representing his art to the world, because just a couple years after it was made, Matisse sent it to all the big international avant-garde exhibitions that were happening in London, Berlin, in New York, also Chicago, for the Armory show. But the painting went, so it went all over the Western world, if you want, but it was never for sale because Matisse would keep it.
And Marguerite had influence on her father, not just as a muse, but also in later years as a manager. That was very unusual for that time, wasn't it?
I think a lot of artist children, then later in their life, they often embrace this role of like kind of it's a hidden role, but they are very essential in supporting their. I mean, it was the case for sure for Marguerite. At some point, she kind of disappears from his art, but she became this very crucial figure in the background, and she was his ambassador in a way. Matisse was in Nice, in the south of France at this point. She was in Paris, where most of the art world was still going on. And so she was his ambassador with the dealers, the collectors, the researchers, museum people. And she was really the point of contact for him. And she was representing him, really.
Just very briefly before you go, Charlotte, this is one of many great shows that have been in France over the years, art shows. Why is France still such a hub for these international exhibitions?
Well, we have great collections here. We have had so many great artists in the 20th century and up to today. And it's Paris especially is so rich of all these many museums. And, Matisse had his studio where he painted many of Marguerite's portraits. He was just in front of Notre Dame. So there's history also.
There's absolutely history here. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us, Charlotte Barat-Mabille. You're the co-curator of the show Matisse and Marguerite Through Her Father's Eyes. That's on now at the Modern Art Museum in Paris through August 24th. Thank you so much.
Thank you.